Okay, so today we're going deep on this listener story about a hunting trip that went very, very wrong.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like a nightmare scenario.
Absolutely. And, we get a lot of listener stories about strange encounters in the woods,
Mm-hmm.
but this one has like a whole other level of intensity to it.
Right, there's an immediacy to this one that's really gripping.
So for our listeners, just to set the scene, our listeners out hunting late at night.
Alone, right?
Yeah, alone, up in a hunting tower.
Using night vision,
Yeah, using night vision and expecting to see hogs.
which is, pretty standard for that kind of setup.
Totally.
Yeah.
But that's not what they see.
No, not at all.
Instead, they spot a man dressed all in black, dragging a sack through the woods.
I mean, talk about a red flag, right?
Oh, huge red flag.
Yeah.
Like in any situation, but especially when you're alone in the woods at night.
Exactly. It just screams something's not right.
And I mean, who is this guy? What's
Yeah.
in the sack? What's he doing out there?
Exactly. A million questions run through your head.
And you're just stuck up in this tower, watching it all unfold.
It's almost like you're forced to become this, this unwilling audience to this potential crime.
It's got to be terrifying. You're basically a sitting duck.
Yeah, that feeling of vulnerability must be overwhelming.
And then it gets even worse because the man actually approaches the tower.
Mm.
Yeah, he climbs a few steps, then stops and kind of like looks around and retreats back into the woods.
So that suggests some level of awareness or maybe even hesitation.
Right. Was he trying to figure out if anyone was up there? Was he trying to intimidate our listener? Or was there something else going on entirely?
We can actually dig into some criminal psychology a bit later to maybe shed some light on that.
Definitely. So our listener decides it's time to get out of there. They climb down from the tower in the dark, which I can't even imagine how scary that would be.
No, especially with the adrenaline pumping and not knowing what's lurking out there.
And then, as if things couldn't get any worse, our listener hears footsteps behind them. Someone is chasing them.
Oh, God. Talk about a fight or flight response kicking in.
Right, your senses must be going haywire at that point.
Absolutely. You're in survival mode now.
And in that split second, our listener makes a decision. They fire a shot, hitting their pursuer in the shoulder.
Wow. Talk about a high-pressure situation.
I can't even imagine.
You're forced to make a life or death choice in a matter of seconds.
So the police arrive. Our listener leads them back to the scene, and they find a blood trail leading to a body bag.
Okay, so this is where the story takes another twist.
Right.
They actually find the suspect hiding under a log.
Can you believe that?
It's like something straight out of a movie.
And here's the real kicker. The victim is identified as Jen Quinn Sakanaki.
Jen Quinn Sakanaki.
Yeah, a local Japanese corner store owner.
Wow, so this wasn't just a random encounter in the woods?
No, it seems like there's a lot more to this story.
All right, this detail about the victim adds a whole new layer of complexity to it.
Definitely. Makes you wonder about the motive behind the attack.
Right, was this a targeted act or just a random act of violence?
Could there have been some kind of prior connection between the victim and the perpetrator?
It's definitely possible.
And if so, what was it? A financial dispute? A personal grudge? Something else entirely.
These are all questions that investigators would need to explore.
And this is where things get really interesting because we start to see the intersection of like personal responsibility and the criminal justice system.
Exactly. I mean, our listener was thrust into this horrific situation, but their actions ultimately helped bring the perpetrator to justice.
But at the same time, you have to wonder about the lasting psychological impact of an experience like that.
Oh, absolutely. You can't just walk away from something like that unscathed.
Right. And it brings up so many questions about trauma and resilience and how we process these kinds of events.
And even though the suspect was caught, there's still so many unanswered questions.
Totally. Like, what drove this man to commit such a heinous act?
What led Jen Quinn Sakanaki to that fateful encounter in the woods?
And what does this whole story tell us about the darker side of human nature?
It's like we've just scratched the surface here.
Exactly. There's a whole web of events and motives that we may never fully untangle.
But by delving into the details and really trying to understand the context, we can at least start to piece together this horrifying puzzle.
And maybe, just maybe learn something about ourselves in the process.
Exactly.
So to our listeners out there, we want to hear your thoughts on this case.
Yeah.
What are your theories? What questions do you still have?
And how do you think you would react in a similar situation?
Let's keep this conversation going.
Absolutely.
We'll be back next week with another deep dive into the mysteries of the human experience.
Until then, stay curious and stay safe out there.